Sì, 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 sì. Hello, hello. How are you? Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Roundtable 6, Micro, Small, and Medium Enterprises Insertion in Value Chains through Financing and New Technologies. My name is Francisco de Michelis. I'm the lead financial market specialist for the IDB. And thank you, everybody, to be here. We're going to start with first our keynote speaker, Alan Elizondo. Alan is the director Director General of Mexico Trust Funds for Rural Development, known as FIRA. Everybody knows it as FIRA. So thank you very much, Alan, for being with us. And the floor is yours. And go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Francisco. I would like to first to thank the sponsoring institutions of this event, particularly the IDB, which has sponsored our institution to be here. I also congratulate Bancoldex for excellent activity here and organization of this fantastic event. I'm starting with a small introduction of the topic. It will take a short time, and then it will be open for the floor for you. If we can go to the next slide. I think to talk about MSMEs and their inclusion.
Alan, you have right in front of you the right there.
Thank you. If we are to talk about MSMEs, it is important first to give a rationale on why is it important to include them in sustainable supply chains. And we have very rapid four important arguments. The first one would be that not only in our country, but almost in all other countries that I know, they are numerous and relevant in almost all supply chains. This is the case for Mexico. If we count what is the number of firms that exist, it is very close to 90 to 95% in almost all the sectors of the economy. This is the case for micro companies, but also for small. And the number that you see there is the number of employees that they have. The second one is that they represent an important share of employment. So it is also very well known. If you see the proportion of labor force by the source of employment, you will find also that the employment in our countries comes 87% for small and micro companies. It is the same also for the agricultural labor, but if we measure them by the size of the plot they cultivate, the smallholders. A third very relevant argument is that these MSMEs are important for a number of supply chains. So it is impossible to work in various sectors without them. So let's think about, for example, the agricultural sector. If we talk about cocoa or coffee, those ones that have a plot lesser than 20 hectares represent, in the case of cocoa, 100% of the production in this supply chain. So it is not possible to work without including them in a supply chain. And finally, they represent an important opportunity for growth and diversification. If you see our country and the average size of the plots, so you have large plots, this will be in the north of the country, you can attest also that the small companies or smallholders are mostly represented in the south of the country, and these are non-integrated to supply chains, so it is not the typical case for these smallholders. However, in the north, you will find a larger average size of plot, and also the productivity that comes together is also higher. If you were to integrate those MSMEs that live in the southern part of the country, elevate the productivity to the average, not only, and I'm not talking to the north productivity, but to the average of the country, you will have a very important increase, not only in productivity, but also make our country, which is a net corn important country, to have a balance of commerce less less negative than today it is the case. So it is also important to comment that whenever you integrate small farmers, and this comes from the experience of our institution in the cocoa supply chain, if you have two small farmers that are one which is not integrated and the other which is integrated, you will find that the yield that they can achieve, measuring it by the tons per hectare, start to increase and tend to go more similar to the larger farmers. It is also, in other countries, what we have attested is also an increased profit, increased quality, and better price if they are integrated to other value chains. And most important, also the presence of smallholders makes more diverse the production that you can find in a supply chain such as the banana. So these are, at least on our opinion, 4 arguments of why it is important to integrate these MSMEs into supply chains. Now, what are the barriers, the type of consequences and causes of those barriers that make it difficult, and most important, what is the roles that PDBs can play in order for them to integrate? Let's think of the first one. If you analyze it, a first barrier for connection of small enterprises to large value chains is a lack of organization and coordination among producers or MSMEs. We know that if they are organized, they have better capacities, they can access lower inputs, lower cost inputs, and more quality. But what we see is that the condition of geographical dispersion, the heterogeneous land tenure, the lack of access to specialized information and advice, and cultural factors make it difficult for these small and medium enterprises to connect. There are also the natural consequences. If they are separated, they have little bargaining power, limited adoption of innovation, expensive access to inputs because they cannot consolidate. They do not have economies of scale. So one first point that I would like to raise is that the intervention that PDBs can have in order for them to organize is first to identify the best legal formation to connect with identify industry. So we have seen cases where ejidos, which is a very typical type of land in Mexico, they can organize rural societies that are commercial, and they can also bring together these small producers so that they connect to these deep markets. If they require, we provide directly or subsidized access to specialized corporate advice so that they can gather together and better connect. And also, we facilitate documentation and legal accompaniment in the process of formation. So even though we are not talking yet about financial resources, we know that the intervention can be very strong by helping them or giving education on how to organize. The second one, and here you have the appearance of an important player, the large industrial or commercial firm. Typically, the micro and small and medium enterprises do not have sufficient information about how to access those markets and what are the opportunities they can have. Again, some of the causes of this lack of information or this market failure come from the remoteness of the location of the MSMEs, some cultural factors, or lack of standalone bargaining power. The consequences, well, commercial and financial inclusion. By not having this information, they remain producing by themselves, sometimes consuming their own produce. They face large volatility of prices because when they go to market, they have to see a diversity of commercial agents that tend to keep the larger margin of their products. And that's it. And the loss of margin faced to multiple small commercial entities. So this will be a second barrier, something that we will point out as an idea. PDB's intervention is to identify relevant industries by their geographic location. Let us think about what is the problem that the industry have to face. They have to feed themselves by using these products. that small companies produce. So they need also intelligence on how these products are produced in the region and the characteristics of production. So that information a PDB can gather together. Sometimes the large industry is a client of PDBs, so it is also something that is easy to have. To advise the demand, so that's what I'm talking about, intelligence about regional production capacities, but also advise the supply. Talk to small and medium enterprises, talk about the price that industry proposes, the product characteristics, and most importantly, the formalization and the contracts that you have to sign in order to connect. Third barrier, one of the most important, is the lack of technology and quality standards. That is the product that the small and medium enterprises are producing is not compliant with the quality that is required by industry. So some of the causes is because of basic infrastructure gap. The inputs they use, they are usually not the required. The genetics of the plants they seed or they plant, it is not resistant to certain characteristics, or even the final produce is not will not comply with what the market is asking. Tradition would be a third cause of not producing with the standard, and not supply due to small scale. Some of the consequences, well, non-compliance. So inefficiency, low productivity, low quality standards. That is something that they face together, and that is why they cannot connect. What is a typical PDB intervention as a third idea? Well, you need to identify relevant technologies from industry and share information. It is easy for a PDB to gather the information or to hire consultants that know those standards. You contract people that is knowledgeable about them, and then you disperse the information. You form groups with producers that make them compliant with the quality that is required. You can also subsidize access to technology. You can form groups of MSMEs with technical assistance to comply standards. And also something that has become very relevant because of market demand, you can also subsidize certifications. Finally, the last one is a fourth barrier that explains by itself. If you do not have done the homework with the previous ones, the typical consequence will be a lack of access to adequate inputs and finance. And they go together because without the finance, having the inputs is difficult. What is a typical intervention? Well, standalone, they become difficult to finance. Once connected, it is more easy to finance them. But then the use of credit mitigation alternatives, such as guarantees. This is a product of excellence for this type of problem of asymmetric information. That is one that PDBs can provide. Supply specialized funding, sometimes because of the location, banks will not enter. It is the case for PDBs that are first year, or specialized entities such as savings and loans or non-regional FIs. Facilitate information and technical assistance on adequate input providers, and also finally provide advice on consolidated acquisition and inputs. I will recall some of the things that were mentioned in this forum. This was mentioned today. It is important, if we want these supply chains to become sustainable, that we share the education and share the information for the quality standards and technology to become sustainable. One example that we have of this has related to the cocoa industry, where the Rainforest Alliance certification was extended to the 280 producers that are supplying this market via this company called Ecom. It is something that was demanded by consumers, but also it was something that the industrial company is requiring. The PDBs are all over this triangle, so that it is open for opportunities for MSMEs, but also hits exactly in the spot for the PDB's objectives. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this has been helpful for you.
Thank you, Alan. Following the agenda that we have, we want to introduce to Tomás Canosa. Tomás is the Undersecretary of Small and Medium Companies at the Ministry of the Economy of Argentina. And he will briefly comment on how government encouraged the integration of SMEs into global supply chains, and how the private sector offers financial instruments to support SMEs and the access to finance. And also, Maria Camila Muñoz, she is the founder and the CEO of Exponential Confirming and platform in Colombia that enables SME to access working capital through invoice discounting. And
thank you very much, Francisco. I want to thank for the organizers and also IDB for the invitation to attend to this important panel. So first of all, I want to show you or to tell you about the program that the Argentinian government launched last year that is called the Plan 2030. And one of the main targets of the program is to increase Argentinian export. For the people attending to this panel that they don't know, last year Argentinian exports were close to 100,000 million US dollars, and the expectations that we are working that Argentinian exports can grow up to 175,000 million US dollars in 7 years, actually. And when we look at the figures about the Argentinian SMEs exports, actually, depending on the different forms that we use in order to understand the value of Argentinian exports of SMEs, they tend to be of higher value. When we look about the value of export owned of SMEs in comparison to the average Argentinian export, they tend to be 2 times higher, or when we also use the complexity methodology that was created at MIT, also SMEs tend to export products that have a higher value than average Argentinian export. So in order to overcome this program, what are the policies that we are implementing every day at the Ministry of Economy? And we work on 3 main areas. The first area is regarding about training. Work very close with SMEs, some of the aspects that were mentioned by Alan earlier. We have the course that has been, we had 10 editions already of CICE, that is a course for SMEs that want to start exporting to different countries, and we also work very close with the Argentinian embassies in all over the world that show actually SMEs the different challenge that they face when they want to enter into a specific country. So those are the 2 main programs that we have regarding the training area that we work very close with SMEs. The second program that we work very close with the IDB and other development banks and organizations is how we support or give technological support to SMEs. We have one program that was created this year that is called Potencia Pymex. So it means like boost SMEs would be the translation. And we give grants to SMEs that exported at least 10,000 US dollars in the last 5 years if they present a good project, and with these grants they can buy some sort of machinery. And we also use the methodology of complexity created at the MIT in order to identify which are the main companies that we want to foster in this agenda. And we also work with the other development organizations about the digital transformation agenda in order also to encourage Argentinian SMEs to boost their exports. And the third aspect, so first I talk about the training aspect, second about the technological agenda, and third one that is one of the topics that was mainly discussed during this morning is regarding the financial support that we from the minister give to SMEs. And we try to overcome some of the problems that were mentioned by Alan earlier regarding the information problem, the absence of qualified management teams in SMEs, the macroeconomic instability of a country, that are some of the problems that SMEs have when they want to borrow money in order to increase the exports, and which is the main program that we have actually at the government right now to help and to work very close with SMEs. We have a program that was created last year that is called CREAR, Crédito Argentino, and we work with the whole financial system. We work with the two main public banks, we work with the regional banks, and we also work with the private banks. And actually with this program now we are banks are giving 20 loans per day, so we encourage SMEs we support SMEs investment subsidizing interest rate. And our main partner in this agenda is actually BICE, that is the Argentinian Development Bank, that is keep working very close with us in order to encourage SMEs to borrow money to finance their investment projects. And we at the Ministry of Economy work very close with them on two aspects. As I mentioned earlier, one aspect is regarding subsidizing the interest rate. The other area that we work very close is regarding the area of guarantees. We usually give partial guarantees between 25 to 75% of the projects that are being financed, but we also started a couple of years ago working on the first loss agenda in order to work with some SMEs that, in spite of having this agenda of partial guarantees, cannot borrow money. So far, we have been working this agenda with a couple of public and private banks, but also this is one of the main partners that we are working this agenda, and we are encouraging the whole financial system to start using these instruments that, when we look at the figures, have proved to be significantly positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tomás. María Camila, please.
Good afternoon. I find it quite thoughtful for me to be here today because I represent a company called Exponencial. We work in Colombia. We are currently moving outside of the country to different Central and South American countries also. But we were born about 11 years ago when the fintech word didn't even exist. And we started promoting capital or access to capital for medium and small and micro enterprises, because once they are inserted into a supply chain, they face a different challenge, and that is access to capital or working capital in order to fulfill whatever they are selling or what the new buyer is actually asking them to fulfill. So we created a platform that is able to be integrated to these large buyers or anchor buyers. And we provide services that automate access for these medium and small companies to visualize their invoices online and advance their payment through a discount. This is called factoring. I'm sure most of you have heard of this financial figure. It has been around, I think, for hundreds of years. But one of the barriers that we faced here in Colombia, and I know it happens in other countries as well, was that in order to discount one invoice, any company needed to comply with several steps, and it was actually a very hard product to be able to access. So medium and small enterprises were very far from this facility, and technology has provided access for them. So being some automated process now eliminates the barriers of geographical access. It allows for their users to access any platform online and actually be able to discount and receive their money within hours. So I think as I was saying at the beginning, and what Alan was mentioning, these challenges they face actually move forward into the supply chain as they need to finance all the processes they need to fulfill in order to be a successful supplier to one of these large buyers that are very nice customers and they want to keep them, but the challenges are hard. So we have been working on awareness because most of these companies didn't even know these products existed and they relied only on regular credit lines, sometimes credit cards with very high interest rates. And being able to provide this access has become massively used and is one of the topics that we want to address today here, and is that banks, as the ones you represent, can provide these funds in a very low cost and efficient way for us to deliver to these small and medium enterprises. So when we go back and start talking about sustainability and sustainable supply chains, we need to think about the cost of the funds they need to access in order to develop their own businesses. So I believe you have a big opportunity here to drive funds or deliver funds into these groups of companies that are striving because of the new access they have through platforms like the ones we have. We have been working with over 35,000 small and medium enterprises only in Colombia. And these were companies that never, or most of them, we believe it's about 80 to 82% of them didn't have access to factoring before. And they are able to discount invoices at in any amount because some of these companies need very low amounts, and we can deliver $10 if they need $10 or make it a large group of invoices at the same time. They also have learned that these products are accessible for small companies, and the changes in generations are also putting people in a position where they need products and services tailored for them that are able to be consumed from several geographic places. And Alan was also mentioning that one of the problems they had in Mexico is that these companies are located in very remote areas, and technology can remove that barrier. So that's what we do here, and we have been working with IDB because we want to deliver the lowest cost possible for these companies. So that's why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Camila. We've been working in this with this issue for many, many years. With Corfo, we had a line also for and in Mexico too. We had like a platform where the companies can go and show the invoice, so all the banks can bid on this invoice. So it was a nice project too. But thank you very much, both Tomás and Maria Camila. Now move on to the roundtable. I will introduce the other speakers first, briefly, and then we can go with some questions. First, Blanca. Blanca is the strategy director of and chief economist at the Spanish National Bank, Instituto de Crédito Oficial. Thank you for coming. Francisco Meneses Poncini is the chief investment officer of in the Chilean Development Agency, Corfo. Everybody knows it at Corfo, no? Ms. Igiona Uzulumba is a CPA. CPA is the executive director and CFO at the Development Bank of Nigeria. Thank you for coming too. Salvador Ferrer, the president of the Banco de la República Oriental de Uruguay, BRO, and Raman, thank you for coming too, is Chairman and Managing Director at the Small Industries Development Bank of India. And now I will proceed to ask everybody a question. First, we start with Blanca. Blanca, how can technology drive sustainability in the supply chain? How can an NDB like ICO helps SMEs in this process?
Okay, well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for your invitation, the attendance in person and the attendance in streaming. Let me begin a little bit. How is ICO formed? ICO Group is formed by 3 different bodies. One is ICO, that it is the accredited institution. We have also Axis, that it is a capital private company that provides equity. And we have also a ICO Foundation that, among other things, it is focused on developing financial skills to the citizens, especially small and medium enterprises. So with these three bodies, we want to achieve some specific objectives that is sustainable growth and also increase the employment. How does ICO do that? Okay, well, we have developed a strategy plan. It's a medium-term strategy plan from 2022 to 2023, and it is focused. Well, it is completely aligned with the priorities of European Union, and also with the national plan of recovery and resilience. So, having this in mind, we have developed 3 different axes. The first one is boost growth. Our growth, we develop this using a on-lending scheme for SMEs and direct scheme for big companies. We have specific instruments for internationalization, and also we try to encourage long-term investment. The second axis is digitalization. Digitalization is a key tool to onboard companies, especially SMEs. Digitalization is important regardless the size. So I think that we have to encourage SMEs to innovation and being active in digital instruments. So we have also specific instruments. Apart from that, the third one is sustainability. We have the sustainability in the 3 aspects: environmental, social, and governance. We have an objective that all new, at least the 40% of the new activity has to be considered sustainable. But what is sustainable? Well, sustainable in a international. Well, we could say based on the European taxonomy for sustainable finance. So with all this in mind, I go to your question, your specific question, that how technology can help sustainability. Well, and particularly in SMEs. Okay, we have supply companies are often SMEs that have not yet started the transition to a more sustainable and digital economy. Maybe so it causes a decrease, a clear decrease in productivity, efficiency. So why it happens? Because maybe they don't have the know-how that is necessary, and sometimes it's because they don't have the resources that they need. So national development banks can help in both aspects. So when we consider how technology, in many occasions, the majority of the times, technology is necessary to go forward a more sustainable activity. I would like to say that in that sense, ECO face a double challenge. First of all, national development banks has to have a benchmark role. We have to be able to make a signal in the market. We have a reputation. We have to show how things have to be done, following international standards. For instance, green bond principles or social loans. We have to do things well. And we have to encourage all the companies that want to do this transition, leaving no one behind. I mean, we have to make them aware, companies, as small and medium enterprises, how important is digitalization and sustainability for them. It's not an election. It's not a choice. They have to follow this trend. If not, maybe they are not going to survive. In that sense, we have to, as Alan said, Camila or Thomas, we have to make them aware. We have to provide them skills. And also, we can, and also, apart from that, we can give finance. Of course, we can give finance, but not only finance is enough. I would like to remark this. And just to finalize, I would like to share with you the link between digital and sustainability with an example. It is an equity finance. Or, the company is called Trackster. It is a freight transport company, so maybe it is not the greenest company that we can imagine, but they want to transit to a more sustainable, sustainable activity. How they are doing? Well, they have developed artificial intelligence, also big data, and they have been able to optimize the distribution routes. The routes are smaller, and they have implemented also relay activity in which the charge doesn't stop, only change the tractor unit. So it has two important effects. Environmental, everyone knows, everyone can imagine. Well, I think it was like a reduction of nearly 50% of CO2 and reducing the time to deliver the package. And also it has, and I think it's very important, a social effect. How well they can go back to sleep at home, and they are safe. I mean, they are not so tired, so they can. It is so well. I think that I have speak a lot. Sorry, but maybe later we can we can follow in and elaborating a little bit some specific instrument. Thank you.
Thank you, Blanca. Thank you for sharing the eco experience. Now we move ahead with Francisco Meneses from Corfo.
Thank you very much.
Yes. You know what? We work with this, of course, together, and I know you know the answer very well. But when SMEs face the classic challenges for access to finance and lacking technical capacities, what can NDB to promote globalization of these firms? I know that you have a presentation.
Yeah, I have a presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, Corfo is the Chilean development agency, and we also act as a development bank. So we tend to support startups from the initial phase until the end. And from Corfo, we provide subsidies, credit guarantees, and Corfo has a long history in Chile creating markets and industries in general. And here we're talking about the financial industry. So we support startups when someone has an idea, they get a subsidy, $10,000, and they can go to Startup Chile. If they want to go abroad, they can spend a few weeks or months abroad. If they need 200,000 they can apply to Innova Chile. And right now, we launched a program called Venture Capital Chile. And here, what we're doing is, from the Chilean government side, if an investor wants to invest $1 in venture capital in Chile, we will match it, double it, or triple it. And then they will go and invest in firms in Latin America. Yes, I said Latin America. I didn't say only Chile. And so this is the most important way in which we are connecting firms with global value chains. We are bringing them smart money, an investor that has the connection in the foreign market. And so we align the incentives with the private sector and make the private sector work for us. Then, when a firm needs more money, let's say more than $2 million, startups and companies in Chile start having problems. Banks are not going to lend them, and they usually go abroad. The successful ones go abroad to raise money. And this is a typical thing in most developing countries. So we have an alliance with the stock market, and we created a new segment called ScaleX. This is for companies that sell up to $40 million to raise capital. We, of course, want to increase it in the future towards $200 million, but that's another story, to connect them with the traditional stock exchange. ScaleX is the first venture capital market in the region, and it's not only in Chile, because the stock markets of Chile, Peru, and Colombia just got together. So this is going to be at least for 3 countries, and it's going to start in a few months. We're going to have the first company having an IPO in the 3 countries for the first time in this market. So to give this a higher boost, we have our money from the venture capital. Chile, we are the largest LP in the country with over $1 billion invested, but now we're also creating a fund of funds. We have already find support from another multilateral bank. CAF has helped, is said that it's going to help us. We're in conversations with the Inter-American Development Bank and the World Bank. The idea would be to finance a fund of funds, and then through local asset managers, of course, half of these are international already, they will invest in these companies at a later stage. Here again, I want to connect the company to the global value chain. I will get them an investor that wants to do that, and that's the simplest way, or one of the new instruments that we are having. Of course, we have all the other instruments, credit guarantees, but I think this is a new step forward, helping SMEs grow at a faster rate in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisco. Now we move ahead with the Joma Uzulumba. Thank you for coming. And how can digitalization help to accelerate SMEs integration into global supply chains? And what can a development bank, the Nigerian development, can do to support this?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and the hospitality so far in Colombia. Thank you very much for that. I think Alan made a good job of how digitalization can help. Just in terms of context for Africa, it's about 1.6 billion people, but also very low income levels. And in terms of global supply chain, it's a continent that is sometimes bypassed in the scheme of things. So only 3% in terms of contribution to world trade comes from the African continent. And I think the challenge for development banks in Africa will be to improve this. Over the years, last year and the year before, we've seen the launch of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. When that is fully operational, it's going to be the largest regional trading bloc in the world, connecting the 1.6 billion people. But I think the critical challenge in Africa has been the fact that we export primary raw materials, oil, and agricultural produce. And a lot of the agriculture is produced at a very subsistence level where the individuals do not have access to any value chains that can also improve their livelihoods and their earnings. So that's the critical challenge that we see in Africa. Development Bank of Nigeria, over the 6 years that we've been in operations, we've been able to lend as a second-tier lender to about 300,000 small businesses. And the effect of that has been that we see increasingly positive outcomes for small businesses in Nigeria. But like Blanca said, it's not just on the lending side. On the non-financial side is also very critical. We've seen how small businesses benefit from training, especially women. We've been able to train women on digital skills that help them to market their products, help them to advertise, help them to have access to larger markets and platforms. I think factoring is something, like Camilla said, that we can really integrate also into what we're doing. We've developed, using technology again, to develop an app known as BizAid, where small businesses can go and get information, because like Alan showed, information deficiency is also one of the causes that makes small businesses not to be able to access supply chains. And there they can learn about how to develop a business, how to incorporate, they can learn about finance, they can learn about operations. And in particular on ESG, we have a course up there that is training small businesses on sustainability for small businesses. And there they can learn about what it entails, what sustainability, and how they can incorporate that into their businesses, and what is the expectation in terms of regulation and compliance as well. As a second-tier lender, we like to also train our partner banks, and then they can cascade down that in a layered fashion to the small businesses. But to your specific question about improving efficiency and digitalization of small businesses, I think to be able to, for them to be able to enter into these markets, especially the export markets, is not just on the goods side. I think where Africa has opportunities also in services, and we've seen a lot of exports of services in the years following COVID, where there has been sort of a disaggregation between, in terms of location. We've seen small businesses in Africa providing services offshore, and that has also led to a lot of improved outcomes. So what Development Bank of Nigeria is doing in specific terms is a lot of training, a lot of engagement, networking, partnerships, also bringing small businesses together in such a way that they can benefit from increased alliances and increased partnerships. And that improves the outcome for the small businesses and helps them to integrate. And in the future, we are building a data asset where small businesses can go and will be like a one-stop shop of where they can find information about how to get financing, but also how to get training, how to get access to markets, how to do research, data analytics in terms of customer preferences. And so those are the things that national development banks can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have learned that non-financial instruments that can play an important role on the promotion of the SMEs. So in your case is definitely important. Now we can go ahead with Salvador Ferrer, president of the BRO, and BRO is both commercial and development state-owned bank, and how is helping the SMEs on the adoption of new technologies to contribute to economic growth and development.
Good afternoon, and thanks Francisco and all the sponsors of the summit for the invitation and the opportunity to sharing with you some comments on this subject, and especially after so many valuable insights. I'm representing Banco República, as you mentioned, an institution owned by the Uruguayan state, which is the main financial institution in the country. But we are not only a commercial bank in fully competition with other private commercial banks, we are also a development bank committed to fostering economic development. In Uruguay, just like in our region, SMEs make up 99% of all businesses and provide employment to around 65% of our total workforce. They play a vital role in our social structure because of their contribution to the diversification of the production base and their contribution to drive sustainable and inclusive economic growth. Due to our unique characteristics, being both a commercial and a development bank, we play a significant role financing and supporting the development of small and medium-sized companies. In that context, I would like to focus on two key aspects, and not only related to their insertion into local production chains, but also into international markets. And those two aspects are technology transformation and adoption of modern payment solutions, and the promotion of export-oriented companies. Let me start with the technology front. The pandemic reminded us of the importance of technology. But not only the big players need to jump on the digital era. For small and medium-sized companies, survival is also related to the adoption of new technologies. Blanca referred to that too. Technology generates operational efficiencies, automatizations, and access to new customers through digital sales channels. But among the many impacts of technology, I would like to mention the importance of adopting up-to-date payment solutions. The second aspect that I would like to highlight is related to the importance of supporting export-oriented companies. In a global and connected market, having a solid international strategy becomes key, but it is even more critical for a small economy like Uruguay, where exports play an important role as promoters of economic growth and development. We are a country with a population of 3.5 million, that produce and export food for at least 30 million. We refer to the importance of small and medium-sized companies in the country, both in terms of GDP and employment contribution. But while they represent about 80% of exporting companies, their share of total exports is only 10%. This is a challenge we need to address. Exporting is not only good for this company, but also for our country. If we look at the type of products being exported, these companies tend to offer a diverse range of products and usually with more added value, similar to the case of Argentina that Tomás explained earlier. So we understand that we have a role to play supporting these companies to reach the external markets, and not only from a commercial perspective, but also based on our development bank role. Let me go back to the first aspect I mentioned. In Uruguay, we have made significant advances related to the adoption of modern payment solutions, starting with a financial inclusion law back in 2015 that helped on providing better payment solutions. This was a game changer. Going cashless was suddenly an alternative to cut costs, improve efficiency, and attract new customers. The number of point-of-sale terminals increased on a permanent basis, and we had a significant revamp on credit and debit card payments. But the digital advances didn't stop there. Digital payment options continue evolving, and we are now observing a significant increase in online payments and exploring e-wallet alternatives. In fact, the share of electronic payments in total transactions skyrocketed from 16% at the end of 2015 to more than 70% by the end of last year. And we have been there supporting our customers to accept new payment alternatives. The other aspect I mentioned is helping companies to step into the global scenario and boost exports. From a banking perspective, we offer a comprehensive program that covers everything from pre-export to post-export financing, as well as a full range of account management services and electronic tools. But we noticed that if we really want to see these companies expand on a global basis, we need to support them on an early stage. Internationalization sounds fancy, but there are a lot of challenges, especially for small companies that lack resources and know-how. This is where Banco República steps in and works together with other country agencies and the Exporters Union to launch a promotion program. The program, known as Pyme al Mundo, or SMEs to the world, consists of turning small companies into export professionals with the help from major exporting corporations who act as mentors. We are still on a pilot experience, but convinced about the potential results. Summarizing, when it comes to support small and medium companies, I focus on two aspects in which we have been trying to help our customers: the adoption of technology, with focus on modern payment solutions, and the steps towards the global scenario. On the one hand, small and medium-sized companies can benefit from modern payment systems to generate efficiencies, lower transaction costs, and offer better user experiences to their customers. On the other hand, supporting export growth is not only good for the small companies, it is good for our whole country. For a small and open economy like Uruguay, the international insertion is key. Our government is focused on the strategy of opening new markets, and that represents a significant opportunity for these companies. Based on the double role of Banco República as both a commercial and a development bank, we are fully committed to support them, contributing to generate sustainable and inclusive development growth in our country. Many thanks.
Thank you, Salvador. I just wanted to say that in the case of Uruguay, which is my country too, BRO can play as there is no definite development bank, no, like a second-tier institution. BRO can play a policymaker role in many cases, like Salvador said, no, and as it has the more than 50% of the market, it is an important player when it goes through new initiatives, sustainable loans, sustainable lines, and other type of instruments that the Bro can put into the system. So thank you, Salvador. I know the Bro well, but thank you for everything. And we go to Raman. Raman, in support of the SMEs to globalize, how can an NDB, like in your case, no, work with other government agencies?
So let me sort of take that question by addressing what is it that the SMEs really lack. So the true absence of credit, both timely credit and affordable credit. So we're talking about SMEs which are probably a little larger in the formal economy with banking relationships. These are the SMEs which have the potential to globalize, to start working with value chains that are, both domestic as well as international. So if we, for the moment, focus our attention on that, what does happen at times is that banks do not like to give working capital, and so working capital ends up becoming a huge constraint. And if they do give working capital, it's normally covered by security. So collateral is something which banks like, and at least in India, we find that banks do not like to lend without collateral. So whether it is working capital or whether it's a term loan, you end up covering yourself well with adequate security. Now, what we really have worked on, and this is really at different levels, both from a country perspective as well as from a financial sector perspective, it's really to digitize and scale up the operations. And therefore, what has emerged as truly a disruptor in the entire financial space is the fact that we have utilized the GST records as stored in the indirect tax as part of the finance ministry. We have exploited the GST data for a particular SME, and based on the transaction history of that particular SME on its GST data, we have been able to mine enough information to be able to replace physical collateral or security, which is typically immovable property, with information collateral, which is information about the transactions of that SME. So, it's really about telling the banking system that, there is risk, we all know that, but you don't have to cover the risk or price the risk and then cover yourself further with physical collateral. You could assess the risk better through the transaction history. So typically what we do is we have now got a system of downloading data through what is known as an account aggregator framework, which is there is a regulated entity which serves as pulling data from where a customer holds data based entirely on consent. So there is a consent-based architecture. We call it DEPA, D-E-P-A, Data Empowerment Data Empowerment Protocol Architecture. Now, this is really designed so that owners of data, which is either individuals or companies, they can decide to give their data through consent, and the entire process has been digitized such that data, if resting with the GST network or resting with banks, where typically my current account might be, I can pull this entire data through the account aggregator framework. It is all fairly seamless and, within a few sort of minutes. The data is then compared between the GST data and the bank statement. So one would expect that if I am making purchases for my input, or I'm issuing sales invoices for my output, which is bought by buyers, both sides would be matched by corresponding financial transactions, which should be available as evidence on my bank statement. So the matching of data in the bank statement with that of the GST has reached a level which, frankly, thanks to the fintechs in India, we have now got a nearly perfect ability to match GST data with bank statement. So this has now become the fundamental basis for doing any sort of working capital lending. So in a way, we're sitting on right now as we speak a disruption going on in the market where the non-banks, so in India we have this whole concept of non-bank financial intermediaries. They are allowed to lend. They're not allowed to give current account and savings account, so no deposits, but they're allowed to lend. So they have been lending based on this kind of information, and slowly the banks have also caught on. So SIDBI has been doing this as a sort of industry leader. So we have created an entire app called GST Help. It's in our language called GST Sahai, which means help. And this particular app is available for an MSME to be able to operate, saying that I want my GST invoices downloaded, this is my bank statement, it's available with you, and there's a paperless trail for giving them a loan and a completely electronic repayment. So it's again through the payment system that's been developed in India. So the domestic economy is now on the verge of what I would really call a huge disruption, especially when it comes to working capital based entirely on GST. Now, you take the same logic and put it onto an overseas transaction, it'll fail. Because there is, of course, a GST invoice, but given the fact that you're now looking at risk lying overseas for an Indian exporter. So what we have got is, frankly, I think 6 or 7 years ago, we imported from Mexico the whole concept of reverse factoring. And that is in India called the TREDS platform, the receivable exchange platform, which, as you had described earlier, is a bidding platform. So this is run very well for the domestic transactions. Now we are taking that same concept onto the international platform. So in India, we have now got an equivalent of an international financial center, and therefore, through that international financial center, we've got this discounting platform established there so that exporters can go into that platform, create factoring units, and then you have the factoring companies of the world taking a risk on the importer and therefore giving the exporter their money. So, I think there is a huge transformation. It was discussed in the context of Colombia also. And this is really where I think digitization is playing an enormous role of whether it is reverse factoring, where the risk transforms to the large buyer, whether it is bill discounting through GST, where immediate invoice financing happens, or it is about, an international transaction where the exporter gets his payment and the factor then sort of takes the risk on the importer. So all these aspects have already taken off and they're already happening. So I would really say that the way we've been able to exploit, information and make the information speak and therefore replace it, replace information, by the physical collateral. And behind this, of course, at least for the domestic transactions, is a very large credit guarantee scheme. So, we have an instant, seamless ability to file loans onto a credit guarantee platform, which is, again, an API-based system. So, the whole transaction from credit appraisal to disbursement of a loan and then filing that loan onto a credit guarantee platform, it's sort of become a digital ecosystem. Thanks.
Thank you, Raman. As we go final minutes, I think I wanted to open the floor to Alan, Maria Camila, or Tomas, also the first ones that I speak, in order to finalize and give us some thoughts, I don't know, Alan, on how the development banks also, these new technology can help through the development banks.
No, thank you very much. I had picked up a lot of ideas from here, very interesting experiences. This one is really, as you call it, something that will change things for real. Just a reflection, I think the work that we have as PDBs is about lowering barriers. I see a lot of barriers that are acting and making a distance between MSMEs and markets. I would call for 3 barriers. One that is important will be an information barrier. And here I will talk on topics that were addressed by Blanca on how, for example, SMEs can access information about new technologies. It is difficult not only for them to access these new technologies, but it is also difficult for suppliers to find them because of the number of the locations of MSMEs. I think we have an important role of PDBs to lower this information barrier by intervening with platforms. In the case of FIRA, we are building a platform that analyzes the supply of information and technology and the demand or the potential demand, which are MSMEs. So we are connecting in a platform all those suppliers of technology so that they can be accessed by our clients, the small and medium enterprises, and then connect to them. And in order to really lower this barrier, we have also to intervene in some cultural factors. So I would call that the second barrier, a cultural barrier, which is that the MSMEs are not used to practice new technologies. And sometimes, even if they are enticed to buy new technologies, they will not like because of tradition. It is a role for PDBs for education to introduce these technologies or something that we have also done to introduce with some small, successful and innovative producers so that they, on their account, also provide this information to their peers. This is something that we are entering in right now, is to provide information about technologies by the producers themselves. And the last one would be a cost barrier. Whenever we have a producer and a small one that wants to certify or pay for a new Industry 4.0 technology, the cost is also an important argument. So what we are practicing right now is providing financing. So we are financing, let's say, drones, for example, for agriculture, not only the ones that spray the plots, but also those ones that have cameras that allow them to see their plots in different ways. So we finance that, but we also, if they want to rent them, we share the cost of rent so that the barrier of cost is lower. So by doing this job, I think PDBs will help not only by financing, which is very important what we do by financing, but also to lower the barriers of access for MSMEs. That will be the thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. If you want.
Thank you, Francisco. I want to make a comment, and when I was listening to all of you, this kept coming back to my mind, and that is about policy making, because in my experience, working with development banks has been a hard path, because policies tend to be done or exist or put in place to be able to finance things in the older ways. So when new technologies come in, new companies, new fintechs, and new options come, the discussion or the internal process tends to be very long. And we are moving very fast, and these products actually do work, and they are safe, and they have securities, and they have technology to back the process. So take back home the challenge to ask your teams or your bosses or your boards of directors to accept the challenge to speed up the process of approving these new lines and actually try them, maybe in small amounts, but do try them, because this works. So that keeps coming back to me when you were all talking about the different topics and the different challenges that are being faced in the different countries around the world.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That's
You have homework.
Yes, the were your final thoughts of the panel, I think. And we're gonna close it here. I think we have we are now on the last minutes of the coffee break also. So thank you very much, everybody, for the. I think it was very useful.
Thank you very much.
And okay, we'll see you around. Bye.